The rain slammed hard against the towering glass panels of the building, streaking them with silver trails under the dim office lights. On the 32nd floor, in a quiet corner cubicle, Daniel Price sat alone, his fingers moving steadily over the keyboard. The rest of the staff had gone home hours ago, but Daniel was still at it, polishing the last set of reports for the week. His black leather briefcase, scuffed at the edges from years of use, rested at his feet. It wasn't the kind of bag you'd expect an employee to carry in a company owned by one of the city's richest men, but Daniel had never been about appearances. He had worked here for more than a decade, and the reason wasn't money, it was loyalty. The man at the top, Benjamin Cole, wasn't just a millionaire CEO. He was a man who built Cole Enterprises from nothing, a man who valued integrity and hard work above all else. When no one else had given Daniel a chance years ago, Benjamin had hired him. In Daniel's mind, that meant something. It meant you stuck by the person who believed in you, no matter what. But not everyone in the company shared Daniel's view of loyalty. The first crack in the perfect glass came 6 months ago. One late evening, Daniel went down to the parking garage to grab a folder from his car. As he turned the corner, he caught the sound of two familiar voices echoing off the concrete. It was Connor Hayes and Marcus Lane from the sales department, two men known for their flashy watches, expensive lunches, and overconfident grins. Daniel had never liked their arrogance, but the conversation he overheard that night made his stomach twist. "Just tweak the numbers," Connor said in a hushed tone. "Cole doesn't go through every single report." Marcus gave a short laugh. "And even if someone catches on, who's dumb enough to say anything? That's career suicide." Daniel froze behind a pillar, listening, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. Their words painted a picture of a scam, overcharging clients, falsifying invoices, and pocketing the difference. It wasn't a harmless mistake, it was fraud. Reporting them without proof was dangerous. Connor and Marcus weren't low-level guys, they had friends in management. If Daniel made one wrong move, they could flip the story and ruin his career. So, he made a decision. He would collect evidence quietly and carefully before telling Benjamin. Over the following months, Daniel worked late into the night, digging into old sales records, cross-referencing invoices, and comparing client accounts. The deeper he went, the uglier it got. He discovered the fraud wasn't limited to Connor and Marcus. There was a small web of employees involved, all protecting each other and covering their tracks. Every new piece of evidence felt like another weight on Daniel's chest. The schemers noticed him too. At first, it was subtle. Missing files from his desk, tense silence in the break room when he walked in, whispers that stopped mid-sentence. But slowly, the hostility became harder to ignore. 2 weeks ago, things escalated. Benjamin Cole called for a full department meeting in the main conference hall. It was supposed to be a routine quarterly review, but Connor and Marcus had other plans. They arrived early, whispering in the corner. Daniel didn't know it yet, but they were about to make their move. When the floor was open for comments, Connor stood tall and addressed Benjamin directly. "Sir, I think there's something you should know. Not everyone here is working in the company's best interest." The room fell silent. Benjamin's eyes narrowed slightly. "What are you saying?" Connor glanced around before letting his gaze land on Daniel. His voice was calm but edged with malice. "Some employees have been accessing sensitive data without proper clearance. I don't want to point fingers, but it might be worth looking into before there's a leak to competitors." Marcus chimed in, his tone dripping with concern. "We've also noticed odd behavior after hours. Again, no accusations, but if someone's undermining the company, it could hurt us all." The unspoken accusation hung in the air. All eyes turned to Daniel. His jaw tightened, but he kept his hands folded on the table. Benjamin looked at him, his expression unreadable. "Daniel? Anything you'd like to say?" Daniel's voice was steady. "I work late because I take my responsibilities seriously. If that's suspicious, so be it. For a brief moment, Benjamin's eyes softened, almost as if he recognized something in Daniel's words. But he didn't press further. All right. Let's move on. The meeting continued, but Daniel could feel the shift in the air, like the slow tightening of a rope around his neck. That evening, as he packed his things, he noticed a folded piece of paper under his keyboard. He unfolded it and read 4 shaky words written in black ink. "You're next. Watch yourself." Daniel sat in his chair for a long moment, the office eerily silent around him. This wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration. The battle had begun. And if he didn't move fast, they'd destroy him before he could even reach Benjamin with the truth. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the office earlier than usual. The building was quiet, the faint hum of the heating system the only sound in the hallways. He didn't turn on his desk lamp right away. Instead, he sat in the shadows for a moment, staring at the city skyline outside the window. The note from last night was still in his pocket. He ran his thumb over its creased edges, wondering who had left it. Was it a threat from Connor or Marcus? Or could it have come from someone on the inside, someone who wanted to warn him without getting involved? One thing was certain, if they were bold enough to target him publicly in front of Benjamin, they were planning something much bigger behind the scenes. Daniel decided it was time to take risks. Quietly, he started making backup copies of every suspicious document he had collected. He stored them on an encrypted flash drive and kept it hidden in his car, far from company property. The last thing he needed was for someone to accidentally wipe his computer. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the office grew heavier. Connor and Marcus seemed more confident, laughing a little too loudly in the hallways, throwing him smug glances during meetings. But Daniel noticed something else, subtle looks from other employees. Some avoided eye contact altogether, while a few seemed conflicted. On Wednesday afternoon, as Daniel was heading toward the elevator, a young accountant named Olivia Barnes stopped him. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder before speaking. "I heard what happened in the meeting," she whispered. "And I know it's not true. But, you should be careful. They're trying to get you fired." Daniel studied her face, trying to gauge if she was sincere. "You know something?" Her eyes darted to the hallway again. "I can't talk here. Meet me in the parking garage after work." That night, Daniel waited in the shadowed corner of the garage until Olivia approached, clutching a folder. She handed it to him quickly, her voice low. "These are copies of altered invoices Connor gave me to process. I kept the originals. If anyone finds out I gave them to you, I'll lose my job." Daniel opened the folder. Inside were side-by-side invoices, one with the real numbers, one with inflated amounts billed to the clients. This was exactly the kind of proof he needed. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. She hesitated. "Because my brother works in construction, and one of the clients they overcharged was his company. He almost lost his job because of it. I can't watch them get away with this." Daniel nodded, his chest tightening with gratitude. "I'll make sure this doesn't come back on you." But just as Olivia turned to leave, the sound of footsteps echoed through the garage. Connor's voice rang out, dripping with fake surprise. Well, look who's having a late-night meeting." Olivia froze. Marcus emerged from behind him, smiling like a predator. "Didn't know you two were working overtime together." Daniel felt his pulse spike, but he kept his voice calm. "Go home, Marcus. You too, Connor." Connor stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "You think you're smart, Price? You think you can snoop around and nothing's gonna happen? We've been here a long time, and guys like you don't last." Marcus smirked. "Better start cleaning out your desk." Daniel didn't answer. He waited until they walked away before turning to Olivia. "Go. Now." The next morning, an email from HR landed in his inbox. Subject line, investigation notice. It claimed there had been concerns regarding unauthorized access to sensitive data, and that Daniel was being placed under review. He was required to meet with HR and Benjamin Cole the following afternoon. It was exactly what Connor and Marcus wanted, to get him in a room with no proof, where their accusations would outweigh his defense. But Daniel wasn't walking in empty-handed. That night, he pulled out the flash drive and began organizing the evidence: altered invoices, client statements, transaction histories, and now Olivia's folder. It was enough to expose the fraud completely. Still, a single thought gnawed at him: what if Benjamin didn't believe him? What if loyalty meant nothing in the face of a well-spun lie? As he closed his laptop, a new message popped up on his phone. Unknown number. They know about the flash drive. Be careful tomorrow. Daniel stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. This wasn't just a fight for his job anymore, it was a fight for the truth. And tomorrow, one way or another, the truth was going to come out. The next afternoon, Daniel walked into the conference room 15 minutes early. The walls were lined with framed photos of Benjamin Cole shaking hands with clients and cutting ribbons at new branch openings, reminders of the empire he had built. Daniel had always admired those moments, but today, the air felt heavy, like the room itself was waiting for a storm. He placed the flash drive in his jacket pocket, his fingers brushing against the small note that had started all of this: "You're next. Watch yourself." He kept it as a reminder of what he was up against. A few minutes later, Benjamin walked in, tall and composed, followed closely by Linda Frost from HR. She carried a notepad, her eyes neutral but curious. And right behind her, Connor and Marcus, dressed sharply and wearing smug expressions like they'd already won. "Let's get started," Benjamin said, taking a seat at the head of the table. His voice was calm, but his eyes flicked briefly toward Daniel, almost as if trying to read him. Linda began. "Daniel, there have been serious allegations regarding your access to sensitive company data. We've been told you've been working outside your role's authorization, and there's concern you may have been preparing to share that data externally." Daniel leaned forward, his voice steady. "Is that what they told you?" Connor spoke up quickly. "We didn't want to believe it, Ben, but he's been digging into sales reports, client accounts, stuff that has nothing to do with his position. You can't ignore the risk." Marcus nodded, frowning in fake concern. "It's not just about him. It's about protecting the company. We all know how damaging a leak could be." Benjamin raised a hand, silencing them. His gaze locked on Daniel. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Daniel pulled the flash drive from his pocket and set it on the table. "I have more than words. I have proof. And I think you'll want to see it before you decide who's a threat to this company." Connor's jaw tightened, but he tried to mask it with a laugh. "This is ridiculous. He's probably made up." Daniel cut him off, his voice sharper now. "No. I didn't make anything up. I found altered invoices, one set with the real numbers, one set inflated so the extra money could be skimmed. I traced those numbers back to accounts linked to both of you." He glanced at Olivia's folder in his bag. "And I have original copies from someone who processed them." For the first time, Marcus's smirk faltered. Benjamin leaned back in his chair, studying Daniel carefully. "Show me." Daniel slid the flash drive across the table. "It's all there, transactions, altered documents, and even a few audio clips I pulled from the security system in the garage the night I overheard them talking about it." Linda plugged the drive into her laptop, and the room went silent except for the soft clicking of keys. She opened a few files. Side-by-side comparisons of invoices, transaction logs showing unusual transfers, and a spreadsheet mapping out the network of people involved. Benjamin's eyes darkened as he scanned the documents. "Connor. Marcus. Care to explain why client accounts have duplicate invoices with different amounts?" Connor shifted in his chair. "It's a mistake. A clerical error. Don't, Benjamin said sharply, his voice dropping into a tone that silenced the room. I built this company on trust. You think I can't tell the difference between a mistake and theft? Marcus tried to speak, but Benjamin's glare cut him down instantly. Both of you, leave this room. Now. They hesitated, but the weight in his voice left no room for argument. As they walked out, Connor shot Daniel a look filled with venom. It didn't matter. For the first time in months, Daniel felt the knot in his chest loosen. When the door shut, Benjamin turned back to Daniel. You've been carrying this for a while, haven't you? Daniel nodded. I didn't want to come to you until I had proof. I knew they'd try to destroy me before I could speak. Benjamin's expression softened, just slightly. That's why I've kept you here all these years. Because you understand loyalty. Most people don't anymore. Linda cleared her throat. We'll begin formal proceedings to terminate and investigate the employees involved. Daniel, you'll be cleared of all allegations. Benjamin stood, extending his hand. You didn't just protect this company, Daniel. You protected my father's legacy. That means more than you know. Daniel shook his hand firmly, but inside, he felt a wave of exhaustion. This wasn't just about winning, it was about surviving long enough to tell the truth. As he left the room, Olivia was waiting in the hallway. She gave him a small, relieved smile. Did it work? Daniel nodded. It's over. But deep down, he knew the battle had left scars. On him, on the company, and on the trust that had once been taken for granted. And as the elevator doors closed, he couldn't help but wonder, in a world full of people willing to betray for a profit, how many would still choose loyalty? A week later, the office felt different. The laughter of Connor and Marcus was gone, replaced by quieter, more focused conversations. HR had moved fast, several other names connected to the fraud ring had been escorted out of the building. The company's leadership announced new safeguards for all financial processes, and for the first time in months, Daniel could work without glancing over his shoulder. But the victory didn't feel like a celebration. It felt heavier. Late one evening, long after most employees had gone home, Daniel found himself in Benjamin Cole's office. The large windows framed the city lights, and on the wall hung a black and white photo of Benjamin as a young man, standing in front of the first tiny office where the company began. You've been quiet, Benjamin said, leaning back in his chair. Most people would be walking around with their head held high after what you just did. Daniel shook his head. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it was the right thing. But it cost me, more than I thought it would. Benjamin studied him for a moment. Loyalty is like a rare coin, Daniel. The moment people see how valuable it is, some try to steal it and others try to destroy it. But you, he pointed gently, you held on to it when it would have been easier to let go. Daniel thought about that. He had been tempted, in those long months, to walk away. To take another job and leave the mess behind. But he'd stayed. Not because it was easy, but because he couldn't betray the trust that had been given to him years ago. Before Daniel left, Benjamin added, You've reminded me of something I almost forgot, that a company isn't built on profits or buildings. It's built on people who stand when others fold. That night, as Daniel stepped out into the crisp air, the streets glistening under the streetlights, he felt lighter. Not because the fight was over, but because he had faced it without compromising who he was. In the days that followed, a quiet ripple spread through the company. People noticed the way Daniel carried himself, not with arrogance, but with a kind of steady, unshakable dignity. And slowly, others began speaking up about smaller wrongs they'd seen. His courage had planted something. The truth was, Daniel wasn't rich. He didn't own a mansion or drive a luxury car. But in the ways that mattered, in integrity, in self-respect, he was wealthier than any of the fraudsters who'd been removed. And maybe that was the real lesson. It's easy to stand tall when the sun is shining. The test is whether you can stand just as tall when the rain is pouring, when people whisper lies about you, when walking away would be so much simpler. Loyalty doesn't make you blind. It makes you strong enough to face the truth, even when it hurts. Daniel had faced that truth, and walked out the other side with his name, his principles, and his honor intact. And somewhere in the city, in an office that now ran cleaner than before, a millionaire CEO sat behind his desk, grateful for one man who had proven that in a world full of betrayal, loyalty still had the power to win.